Welcome, guys. Welcome to today's panel by Brown China Summit. And today we're going to talk about environmental justice in China. I am Rose Shen, a sophomore concentrating in environmental studies, and I'm honored to be moderating today. In today's panel, we examine the realities of environmental justice in China. In recent years, China's efforts like wholesale electrification and rapid transition to rapid energy transition to renewable energy is undoubtedly commendable. However, our discourse today excavates issues that evade conventional narratives grappling with unspoken environmental and social injustices within China's rapid environmental transitions. We confront the reality that despite monumental top-down initiatives, certain communities bear the brunt of systemic oversight. Within the tapestry of China's environmental transition, we discern threads of marginalized narratives, experiences, and struggle that demand our scholarly and activist focus. This conference enables us to amplify voices that have long been muted, unraveling narratives that resist easy categorization within the Western-centric discourse. Merging sociological analysis with community-driven activism, we aim to dissect the phenomena at the core, while amplifying the voices of Chinese activists fighting at the forefront of environmental justice. And we're honored to welcome our panelists today. We have John Logan, Brown University sociology professor and an influential figure in urban sociology. Previously, Professor Logan directed the Mumford Center and Urban China Research Network at the University at Albany and is the author of the book Urban China in Transition. Next up, we have Zhao Zhong, founder of Green Camel Bell, a Chinese environmental NGO that leads programs focusing on environmental education, water pollution monitoring, and community-based eco-agriculture and sustainable development in the Gansu province. Last but not least, we have Binhuang Xu, a curator, editor, and researcher whose research-based practice focuses on ecological and socially engaged art. She graduated from the Guangzhou Academy of Fine Arts and practices through interdisciplinary collaboration. Binhuang has participated in projects like the Heavy Metal Country Tour, which raised awareness of heavy metal pollution in rural China nationwide. And with this panel, the panelists will each talk briefly about the unique perspectives that they bring to the table. And we will start with Dr. Logan.
Well, thank you, Rose. And I appreciate people coming out this evening, or if there's anybody from China getting up early in the morning to participate in the panel. And so I was a little bit taken aback when Rose asked me to talk at a conference on environmental inequalities in China, because my background as a sociologist is on issues of urban development and urban inequality, both in the United States and in China. And environmental issues come up as a part of that. But the real focus is, in most of my work, has been on how where people live has such a strong impact on their lives and their opportunities and their children's opportunities. And so the issue of environmental hazards, and I'll put it in terms of hazards, like it will kill you if you live there, is one of the kinds of disadvantages that compounds the inequalities among people based on other things that are more essential, like in the United States, especially their race, social class, in China, especially whether they are local or migrant people, and therefore what kind of housing and what kind of community can they live in, or on a much larger scale, what region of the country are they living in, and what are the issues that are specific to that region. And I'm thinking especially of the issues in the northern industrial part of China, where at the same time there is the continuing problem of deindustrialization and loss of jobs and people having to transition to other kinds of ways to make a living, and is difficult, just like in the deindustrializing factory belts of the United States. And in addition, because of the historical residue of the industrial infrastructure, there's just all kinds of bad things in the water, in the ground, nearby, even if it's been torn down and built on top of, it's hazardous, which is something that we see in many parts of the United States, but there are parts of China where that historical infrastructure that supported people's jobs and livelihoods over a long period also now is threatening to their health. So my perspective is to think about what's the nature of the inequalities in the society, and how do those show up in terms of things that where it matters where they live, because, and this is especially true with environmental issues, the quality of your environment, it depends on where you live. And I was talking to Rose about this in terms of environmental inequalities, and I pointed out that people that I know who visited Beijing in the last few years invariably come back and say, this is an awful place. The air, you just can't breathe the air. It's going to make you sick, etc. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the nicer part of the city where the big universities are, or you're in a poorer part of the city, or it's the whole area is just very difficult in terms of the health hazards associated with the air quality. And so it's hard to say that that's a matter of how social inequalities show up in environmental questions, because to the extent that everybody faces the problem, it's an environmental hazard, but not necessarily an environmental inequality. But even within cities, and this is true within cities in China, different parts of the city have different characteristics in terms of the living environment. One of the earliest studies that I did, I probably should have mentioned that in 1986, I had my first opportunity to visit China, and I was teaching a course at Nankai University in Tianjin. And I began to have the opportunity to meet people and work together with people who had access to data. And for a sociologist, access to data is the key thing. And I was able to do very early on a study of neighborhood inequalities in Tianjin and in Shanghai. And I looked at several kinds of questions, some just straight sociological questions. Where do people of higher social class and higher education live? And what are those neighborhoods like? And where do people from very different social class backgrounds live? But in terms of environmental issues, I was able to get measures of two things that were important to people's local physical environment. One was the availability of parks and trees and grass and flowers and so on. And at that time, it was well past the Cultural Revolution, when they sort of tore everything down and denuded the local landscape. And it was very clear that different parts of the city, different neighborhoods, had very different kinds of qualities in terms of that aspect of the environment, which is, on the one hand, the amenity, like it's a nice place to live, you're close to a park, but it's also associated with things like the quality of the air and so on in the local environment. And the other was a measure that is not exactly about the physical environment, but it affected the physical environment very much. And that was the source of fuel for heating and for cooking. And the big difference was between the many people who were still cooking with coal, and often they were cooking in a very small kitchen area with coal, which is known to be just really hazardous to people's health, or neighborhoods that were already being served by piped gas. And so you have a gas stove and gas heating, which is like totally different. Now, in many neighborhoods of Chinese cities, even poor neighborhoods, everybody, I mean, nobody's cooking with coal much anymore, except in villages. And the question is, do you have air conditioning or not? You know, the issues have changed over time, but the inequalities were very clear. And it was clear that the neighborhoods, and this is in socialist China in the 1980s, the neighborhoods where the better educated people lived, and people who worked for work units that had higher bureaucratic rank, and so they were favored in terms of resources made available by the by the by the government. Those neighborhoods were the neighborhoods with more access to parkland and more access to trees and more access to pipe gas. So these inequalities showed up even in socialist China in the 1980s. I hate to think just what the situation is now when other kinds of inequalities have become much more magnified. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Logan, for your presentation. Now we have Mr. Zhao Zhong to just briefly talk about his work at the Green Canada. Hello? Are you talking?
He's muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, and just try to open my PowerPoint. Just give me one more minute. Okay. Okay, thanks for the introduction by Rose Chen, and also thank you for inviting me to the interesting summit, and why Professor Logan provide a comprehensive overview of environmental justice issues from a researcher's perspective. I'm here to present an activist perspective on environmental justice and introduce the grassroots actions we have taken. Environmental justice concern among grassroots activities involved at different stages. These concerns have shifted from early issues like environmental rights of pollution victims to broader concerns like social impact and procedural justice in environmental programs. More recently, we have turned our attention to climate justice and the equitable and justice energy transition. About 20 years ago, the environmental justice issues that Chinese activists focused on were centered on people's environment rights, access to clean water, clean air, and healthy food. Vulnerable population, including women, children, ethnic minority, farmers, herders in remote and rural areas, were disproportionately affected. These communities suffered the consequence of environmental harm. despite not being producer of pollution or beneficiary of industry development, is a fundamental injustice. 50 years ago, our focus turned to a small village of 1,500 people along the Yellow River. For decades, the villagers have been drinking untreated water from polluted Yellow River. The situation worsened as more petroleum, chemical, heavy metal plants were established upstream. Residents believe that health problems and deaths were linked to drinking untreated water polluted by nearby industry. At that time, more than 400 severe polluted villages in China like this one were named as cancer villages as the price of rapid economic development. In response, our organization, Green Campbell, published and distributed a legal handbook for people impacted by water pollution to educate the villagers about their legal rights. We used the Information Disclosure Act to request wastewater discharge data and pressured this company to clean up their production. We also distributed water purification materials and equipment to villagers for free, which provided temporary relief, just temporary. Through bottom-up advocacy and media campaign, the government eventually built a new pipeline from the waterworks to the villager, ensuring clean water for 1,500 residents. So that's my first story. And now let's move to the second stage. Over the past decade, the Chinese government has increasingly prioritized environment protection, resulting in significantly improvement in reducing pollution. While it's positive for the environment, we have also identified negative social impact from certain environmental projects. For instance, to address urban garbage, some residents suddenly found the incinerator under construction near their home without prior knowledge. To protect biodiversity and wildlife, some villagers have to leave homes they had lived in for generations, as their land was designated as protected areas. To improve air quality, coal stoves in farms' homes were forcibly removed without alternatively heating solutions. It's another form of injustice. In order to protect endangered wildlife, such as giant panda and their habitats, China officially declared the establishment of Giant Panda National Park in 2021. Giant pandas and wildlife must be happy with more space to move around and less human interference, but not necessarily happy for farmers who have been set aside in the national park. Some farmers have facing migration and relocation, even though they live there long before the national park was established. There are also some restrictions on economical activities within the national parks, such as farmers are not being able to cut firewood or build new road or develop industry project within the park. At the same time, wildlife population has been recovering in the park, and the wildlife damage to farmland and injuries to humans happen regularly. Farmers in national park feel it's unfair and it's not environmental justice. To address these issues, we conduct community survey and meetings, identify the social impact that concern farmers in national park the most. We included this concern in the Giant Panda National Park Social Impact Assessment Report and made recommendations to the administration for social impact management. These recommendations emphasize the avoidance of invulnerable resettlement, respect for cultural traditions and religious beliefs, and encourage women's participation in community affairs and decision-making. Any activities that may affect the right, land, resources, territory, and traditional livelihood of community members must not proceed without the free, prior, informed consent process. We also introduced alternative livelihood such as ecotourism to reduce the community's demands for natural resources and mitigate the impact on the community's economy. In the long run, we hope that social impact assessment as well as climate impact assessment become mandatory procedures for all construction projects, similar to environmental impact assessment. Now let's address the hot topic of the day, climate justice. In China, those most affected by climate disaster, including herders on the Tibetan Plateau, fishermen on the coast, and farmers on the arid areas. They bear the physical and economical risk of climate change, despite having a small carbon footprint. This too is a form of injustice. One of our project sites is a Tibetan herders community with only 8 households on the Tibetan Plateau. They have a near zero carbon emission lifestyle. Their electricity comes from the solar, their cooking energy from the yakdang, they are using horse as their transportations. Yet they are also the most vulnerable to climate change. Climate disasters such as drought, wetland degradation, desertification, storm, soil erosion have become more frequent to these remote nomadic communities. They are unsure about the causes of this disaster, and their Buddhist beliefs leave them praying repeatedly. This too is a climate injustice. To increase the climate resilience of the community and mitigate the negative impact of climate, we conducted training sections to inform herders about climate change, its causes, responsibilities, adaptations, and loss reductions. We conducted climate and environmental monitoring on grassland and collaborate with herders to improve rangeland management for climate adaptation. Additionally, we have herders develop alternative livelihood, such as ecotourism and handcraft production. The most critical action, however, is controlling greenhouse gas emission at their source. As an environmental NGO, we collaborate with affected community to advocate for the early phase out of fossil fuel by policymakers, investors, and energy companies. It's essential for achieving an equitable and just energy transition. In conclusion, environment justice remains a critical issue in China, and grassroots activists play a vital role in addressing this concern. Our journey is ongoing as we strive for a more equitable and sustainable environment future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation on the different stages of environmental injustice in China. Now we will move to Binhuang, who created and have participated in activism regarding environmental justice in China.
Hi, everyone. Please wait for a minute. I want to share the screen.
Oh.
Doesn't work.
I think you should be able to share that.
Okay, sorry. It doesn't work.
Is it working right now?
Oh. Okay. I'm so sorry. I cannot. Hmm?
I think that screen sharing is turned on.
Yeah.
So the question is whether Bing
Okay.
can see how to share the screen. There we are.
Everyone, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you for having me here. And today I'm going to share some of the independent practice that focus that focus on the environmental pollution problem, but in a creative way. And thank you for having me here again. Yeah, it's a nice pleasure, and I'm looking forward to discuss this practice more deeply with everyone. And I'm going to share the independent environmental practices of the artist Nut Brother and the environmental investigator Ping Xi, also known as Ping Lei. And now the picture that everyone sees is the poster of one of the project that creates by Nut Brother. For this recent year, the most two famous cases of Nut Brother is Spring Souls Project. Is the poster that everyone seeing right now, and the heavy metal country tool. And both projects focus on the environmental pollution problems in rural area of mainland China. And the first project is initiated in 2018 and focus on the water pollution problem in Xiaohao too. This is the name of the Xiaohao too, and of the Shanxi province, and the second project was initiated from 2021 to 2022, involving 8+1. It's focused on the different villages in mainland China with heavy mental pollution of water, land, food, air, and something else, including the Qinghai province and Guangdong province, Hunan province and Yunnan province. In these two projects, the artists collaborate with local people, nonprofit environmental organizations, art space creators, journalists, and independent media reporters to review the environmental pollution problem in different places in the form of socially engaged arts. For example, by inviting the heavy metal band to perform in the polluted places, just as everyone's seeing right now, or transforming the polluted rivers into a hot pot and then put it online to make it as a fake restaurant and invites everyone who can use their smartphone to like try to order something from this kind of hot pot. Yeah, but actually the hot pot just polluted river, or like collaborate with the local people, display the polluted water as the bottle of the mineral water in supermarket. They bring the polluted water from the places already been polluted, far away from Beijing, but they try to bring it, drive it over there, and to display it in some art space. Or they try to create an online selection of local environmental protection heroes and encourage the people to announce a name that who protect the local people most, try to make it as a hero. And a lot of local people just respond online. Yeah, or they create like a mobile art museum. And This project creatively turned the issue of the pollution into a form that widely aroused the awareness of the government and the masses. Also, the artists always trying to create some artwork or some like interaction project that deal with the emergency situation while making the project. And fortunately, after the exposure led by the Brain Salts project, and to a certain extent, the local government has dealt with the water pollution problem. And some of the local governments have also modified the local pollution issue after the heavy metal country tour. But unfortunately, these treatments have not yet addressed the root causes of the pollution, and most of the on-site parts and on-site government basically have a response by trying to shut down the news of the pollution rather than solve the problem. And these projects are mainly concerned with the problem of the environmental pollution on the basic rights of humans in the countryside of mainland China. But compared to the artist, not brother, who is good at responding to and exposing the pollution issues in a short time. Additionally, I would like to share Ping Xi's practice as well, which is focused on the survival rights of fireflies and work with a long-term approach. While the urban development continue to encroach on rivers and lands, and this combined with the urban light pollution and the overuse of the chemical materials has resulted in the lack of the habitats for firefly. In 2021, Pingxi and her friends initiated a project that includes a fake firefly park. Is the picture that everyone's seeing right now. They make a park and names it like a fly park and recruit the people online to go in there to join the park, to give them a tour. And they said that, oh, this is another policy announced by the government. In the future, there will be a firefly park, but actually it's not. They're just trying to do this kind of thing to arouse the awareness of the masses and of the government. And they also create a firefly light, a firefly lights off month, which is encourage the people to reduce the uses of their lights in Shenzhen. And also they make a wedding that arouse the people come from every corner of the society to marriage with the fireflies. Yeah, and this is another event that Pingxi creates this year. She collaborates with the various partners to create an outdoor firefly exhibition in Guangzhou based on a land that going to be demolished and built into a highway. And unfortunately, these actions have not yet received further local response or improvement from the government. But it has made more people aware of the basic survival rights of this special species in the urban area on site. And I think in the contemporary art area of mainland China, there are many artworks, projects, and practice that focus on the environment or the multi-species relationship through art creation. And my interest in these two practitioners also stem from the transdisciplinary working methods and collaborative relationship that I have personally learned from them. And this is my sharing, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for all of your presentations. We have definitely learned a little bit about their unique perspectives and their previous work experiences regarding environmental injustice in China. And so now I would like to start off with this discussion question. to the three panelists. So first question, in China, what does environmental injustice look like, and what are the factors that exacerbate environmental inequality? So kind of to provide context for this, as some of us might know, environmental injustices in the US present themselves in air pollution disproportionately impacting African American neighborhoods, the continuous violations of indigenous people's land rights, just to list a few. And so we want to know, in China, what are some of the factors that make specific communities vulnerable, and what does it look like?
Well, let me say something about that. And what I want to do is I want to emphasize what are the key general sources of social inequality in China, and then ask to what extent do environmental problems disproportionately affect certain sectors based on those dimensions. And one of them, which has been brought up in the presentation so far, is the urban-rural divide. And probably this is the most fundamental aspect of inequality in China, that so much resources and attention and investment has been directed to the cities, and particularly the coastal cities, and so little actually historically to the countryside. And so the rural environment is kind of left as a kind of, well, who cares about it? And in addition, the rural environment in areas that are close to cities has been taken over and occupied by the expansion of the cities. And so what used to be the villages and the countryside of a particular settled group of people is vastly changed. Now, that's not necessarily always perceived as a bad thing, because it can be economically profitable. The value of people's land or their collective rights to property may be important. And it overlaps with another major dimension of inequality, which is between the local people and migrants, and particularly in the suburban areas outside of the major cities. There's been a tremendous growth of the migrant population from other provinces, and they live under conditions where they do not have actual political rights. It's the local people, in fact, local villagers, who may be a small minority of the population, but who actually are represented in the forms of local governance that are available in China. And so you have these disproportionate impacts, that there's a very large share of people doing a large share of the work, while a very small proportion of the people that you might have thought these are the people who are vulnerable in the countryside, that are actually becoming enriched by the pattern of urban development. So it is a very complicated situation. And the one other thing I wanted to emphasize is with respect to economic and income and wealth inequalities, and how this works out. And the surprising thing for me, as I've learned more about how urban development takes place in China, is that I started thinking from an American perspective that the cities are redeveloping the inner city and displacing people, and poor people who are displaced. And what I've learned instead is that the Chinese are very good at negotiation. And what was at one time a pattern of the government makes a decision, these people are going to have to move, or they're not going to get anything. Actually now people look forward to the possibility that their homes are going to be destroyed and redeveloped, and they're going to get paid off. And this is happening in cities. It's also happening to the people who have local political rights in the countryside, if their village is displaced, they get an alternatively large new homes, and they have the right to build rental housing in poor conditions for the migrants who are moving into the area. So this is a very complicated situation to try to figure out who is benefiting, who is losing, who has the major disadvantage, how should it be changed? And it's a very fluid situation. You might think that China, being a non-democratic, non-participatory political system, that it would all be very top-down. And what I've learned over time is it's much more complicated than that. A lot of dynamics and a lot of negotiation, a lot of opposition, a lot of protest, a lot of demands. I have a question that's based on that observation for the other two panelists, and that is, what do they find as the response to the initiatives that they are taking on? To what extent, on the one hand, is it repressed? To what extent is it ignored? And to what extent do they find a certain amount of engagement from different levels of government?
Yep, and I just want to follow in Professor Logan's response. And yeah, I totally agree with Professor Logan said it's a very complicated issues in China if we talk about environment justice, and it's not just environment issues, it's not just legal issues, it's even not just social issues, it's a comprehensive issues. So maybe I just want to introduce more about my background. So I started with the organizations focused on environmental education. At that time, about 20 years ago, I thought if we give people more environmental information, increase their environment awareness, we can easily solve all the environment problem. But quickly, I realized that is more difficult, more comprehensive, more complicated than I thought. So we started to transit our focus from education to rural areas. We think we cannot only to focus on the environment problem, we should thinking about the people who are living in the environment, and as well as we need to have a more legal background, we need to more sociology information and the technologies, how we communicate with the community members, how we can encourage their participation, how we can promote public participation, how we can encourage public participation in the legislation, in decision making. All those issues will be a very important factor for our future work. And to respond Professor Logan's questions, to be honest, I'm still not expert in this topic, and it should have to be case by case. And so I think if we talk about environmental justice, maybe it's a new terminology for some person, but everyone can realize, because in China we can identify every Chinese as a victim of environmental issues or as a victim of pollutions, and it can be the air pollution, water pollution, the soil contaminations, it can be the climate problems. So everyone is the victim of environment issues in China. So everyone's facing to the environment injustice, and including those policymakers, the government officials, they are also thinking about, because I also have many friends, they are working with the government, and they totally agree what we are doing about the environment protections, but under their positions, they have much more concerns, for example, the economical development, the stabilities, and also other political or economical concerns. So I just So my point is, it's really a very comprehensive issues, and for us as a grassroots environment NGOs, we just try our best to solve some problem. It can be very specific cases for a small group of person, and at the same time, we try to do advocacy to encourage more public participation in the decision makings, and to deliver our concern, deliver our voice to those policymakers to make bigger changes. Yeah.
Thank you for your question for Professor Logan, and I quite agree with Zhao Zhong. Yes, this question just remind me while we conduct the heavy mental country tour in the different village, village and different province in mainland China, the situation is quite different. Because we are talking, for instance, if we are talking about the local people's response, while about their awareness of the heavy metal pollution is quite different. I think, for example, in the north side of mainland China, the only places that the local people would like to collaborate with us is because some of the people from the local government take advantage of their rights of the land. And they hope us to join to reveal the heavy metal pollution problem, because can help them to gain their rights of the land. This is basically the only reason. And in the middle of the mainland China, that the village that we went to, no one have any awareness of about the heavy metal pollution in their own village, because a lot of people, they migrate, they work as a worker migration, or some people just set the former worker in the urban area. So only the elderly or the children live in the village. And this kind of people, it's very hard for them to have this kind of awareness that, oh, we are living in the poison places. Even though we are working over there, we try to make some a big event to reveal this kind of serious problem, but they just seem like the way that they've seen at Earth, they look at Earth is, these people, they are making some party or ceremony or events, performers. They don't know what we are doing about. And when we went to the north side of the mainland China, the people try to report our actions to the local government, because we took the picture, we took the video, and the people can notice that we are not the local people from our parents, from the way that we are dressing, the way we are talking, because we talking in Putonghua, in Mandarins. Yeah, and some of the local people just taking their phone to record what we are doing, because we investigate the heavy metal pollution problem, and they report to the local government. And why we know, because we have the other friends secretly behind this kind of person took another picture and recorded what he say to the Shuji, the leader of the village. So I think when we're talking about the environmental inequality or injustice, it's very complicated, just like Zhao Zhong said. Yeah, so the local people, or the people who suffering from this, their reaction is quite different. Yeah, I think, and also I think this is also related to the very special situation of the development between the rural area and the urban area in mainland China. Yeah, because there is a lot of migration, and yeah, and this is my answer. Thank you
so much for your discussion on this issue. So it seems like there's mixed reactions between, well, there's a lack of awareness of the sources of pollution in some of the villages, and also there are cases when the ones that are being affected by environmental pollution are actually kind of going against intervention that would raise awareness of the issues. And so we have more questions that are going to guide the discussion, but being mindful of time, do we have any questions from the audience that like people would like to ask? Because if there are, we could prioritize those, I think. Yeah, Leo.
Thank you. So I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this in a good way because I'm not entirely sure what the context is. But as far as any movements or efforts to address industrial pollution that are happening right now, are those efforts resulting in kind of the pushing offshore of some of that industrialization and some of that environmental pollution? Or is there potential for that pollution to be pushed offshore, and how could that be avoided in environmental actions?
Yes, so to repeat the question, I think Leo was asking how, kind of like in your perspective, with your past experiences, do you think that the pollution, well, the polluting sources they're causing a lot of like material, the environmental injustice, specifically pollution in villages, when there are, let's say when people are fighting against that, is there a possibility that the polluting sources will be moved offshore? And then in that advocacy, are there ways to prevent the polluting sources to be moved offshore and thus impacting other communities in other countries that are maybe even less regulated, right? Is that the question?
I'll say something about that. For sure, what China is doing now is carrying out a strategy of upgrading the technological level of the economy and moving away from the basic industrial production and even mass production manufacturing, light manufacturing, the garment industry, and all of that, and investing in Africa and in Southeast Asia and trying to develop inroads into Central Asia, where it would be more profitable for China to have that kind of low-end activity somewhere else, but to some degree under their control, and you might call that offshoring. And at the same time, within China, it seems like there's a very aggressive response to trying to deal with the issues of renewable energy and climate change, and beginning to attack water pollution and air pollution more aggressively, beginning to think that economic development is not the only goal, but tackling issues of inequality, tackling issues of environmental hazards also is worthwhile, and maybe an official could make their career on those issues. They're starting to move in that direction. So China is on the move in this respect, and I'd say very rapidly. How effective it's going to turn out to be is very hard to say. I certainly doubt that China is going to be aggressively trying to protect the impacts of its offshoring of manufacturing and industry to other places, to try to minimize their impacts on the local people in other places, because there's no money in that.
Yeah, and I also want to make some more comments, and because I have worked for the environment NGOs more than 20 years, so I have witnessed the history of Chinese environment movement in past 2 decades. I think, and in the first 10 years, we are not so optimistic because we think the environmental protection is very difficult in China. And since 10 years ago, things tends to be very aggressive. I think it's mainly depends on the political will. It means the leaders of China have a strong interest to environment, and most of the policies related to environment are top down. It's from the central government to provincial to municipal and local government. So the political will make a fundamental role in the pollution control inside China. And so for people like us working for the environment, we just feel very lucky because it seems like we choose a very promising, very good career. But for some other areas, people working for LGBT, for labor, for gender issues, they are not so lucky. Many labor NGOs or LGBT NGOs were closed recently. That still means we have some space working for the pollution issues, and that's I think that's the key issues, but we still need to thinking about the civil society's efforts on that issues, and as well as the technology innovation, as well as for example, the China has more and more new technologies to improve to control the pollutions, and the EV technologies, the solar renewable energy technologies. That's all make fundamental changes for the environment protection in China. But I think the political will should be the number one. The second is the technology innovation, and the third might be some efforts by civil societies like us. We try to do some bottom-up advocacy for that. So that's the pollution controlling in China, and so maybe if you have interest, you can just go to the website. There's many articles about the history of Chinese environment movement in last 20 years.
Do we have any other questions? Just being mindful of time. It's 9:01. But if not, well, if you do, you can definitely stay behind. And if you don't, I think we're gonna let Binhuang finish this question.
Oh, thank you. Because I'm not expert that working on the environmental pollution, so I only can talk about the cases that I already knew. And one of the places, one of the village that we went is one of the A+1. Is exactly that the situation that the audience are talking about. The village, the name is the Yangchun, and the heavy metal pollution or situation over there is they suffering from some like abandoned battery from the Pearl River Delta, because some related they have the advantage connection with the local government, so they secretly just bought the abandoned battery from the developed area and cover it by land and hire them just under the water, under the land, and without like any professional procedure. And a lot of local people for this year, they got cancer, headache, and some people die because of this kind of polluted battery. But there's no direct evidence to show this kind of effect because of this heavy metal pollution. But the way that the local government deal with this is annoy the difficulty or the hurt of the local people. So when we went there, when we like make a big event, make a big widely propaganda online, and then the people who from the up can see this kind of a situation on the bottom, so they try to control the news, try to control our work, not to getting more widely propaganda online. But in the end, yeah, they try to deal with this kind of pollution, but it's only that way do something bottom up and then up to bottom. This kind of thing maybe can be solved, but otherwise, I don't think the local people or the people who live just live in the local area can't do anything with this kind of thing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, we have one last question from Angela. Yes.
Thank you all for today. Especially I have a lot of peers and a lot of friends who are from the mainland who are very passionate about climate and environmental issues, but many of them have this feeling of like it's only possible from the top down from these very specific narrative branches and approaches. But the work that you have done here and shown today is that not only is activism and the work you're doing very important and vital, but it's also a necessity, and you work in tandem with the government to advance these environmental needs. So I kind of have two questions. The first is, do you have any advice or words of encouragement for Chinese activists or environmentalists who want to work in this field? And the second is, are there any lessons that we in the US and in other places can learn from the work in China as well?
Thank you for your question, Angela. So kind of to repeat the question, we were talking about how, so Angela mentioned how she has a lot of friends, like youth, that she knows a lot of youth from mainland China who are passionate about environmental issues and climate actions. But she's wondering, like, sorry, your first question is in a lot of cases, in other places, environmental and climate movement work from the bottom up, but from listening to your examples, we have realized that you work sometimes in tandem with the government to ensure certain actions and certain impacts are brought forth. So, sorry, Angela, can you repeat your first question?
Yeah, the first question is kind of just like, do you have any words of encouragement for students or activists or workers in China who are passionate about these issues and want to pursue them through the means of the NGO or through activism or through art and music? And the second question is like, do you have anything that you think that environmental activists and NGO workers can learn from outside of China?
Okay, so the first question would be, what advice would you give to aspiring Chinese environmentalists or activists who are relatively younger in addressing the environmental issue? And the second question is, what do you think the examples and activism or the things that you're doing in China right now could be a lesson or could be learned by, you know, environmental climate movements in other areas in the world?
Well, one thing I'd like to say is the kind of work that Bing is trying to carry off that makes use of the creativity of people who are involved in art and music and generally the arts has a tremendous potential for resonance in the public level, and particularly, I would say, in the United States among young adults. And I think some of the kinds of things that she's doing here, you've seen them also happening in a very similar way in Western Europe. But I have not seen so much in the United States, and I think that local groups in the U.S. could learn some lessons both from China and from Western Europe on this point. And then the other thing, which is an interesting kind of lesson, is that Zhao Zhong is pointing out, now the government, in a certain sense, is on their side, and they're riding the wave. And I'm not sure whether it's a lesson that we can learn from China or the Chinese should anticipate what may happen in the future based on our experience in the US. Whenever the government becomes the promoter of something, then grassroots activism has a potential to be co-opted and used and leveraged by the state, and not exactly in the way that people intended, and yet it's comfortable. And so this is it'll be very interesting to see how this develops in the Chinese case, where the government is very aggressively trying to deal with environmental issues, in comparison to the US, where government at most levels is actually pretty resistant still. And so in the US, we see more of a relationship of protest and opposition between grassroots and the state. But what's going to happen in China when it's potentially so much more cooperative? Can it be cooperative? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, I also want to make 3 comments. And the first thing is, as Professor Logan said, to be more creative. And the environmental movement and climate movement can be very cruel, very funny things. And we just want to use your creation to make the campaign more funny. For example, I heard some user organizations developed a board game, and so use the board game can encourage more users to understand better about the climate issues, and also to use the game to connect, to make networking with other young activities with a similar interest on climate issues. So that's the first thing, is to be more creative. And the second thing is about the false solutions, because we just realized the environment for the climate and the environment movement, there are a lot of false solutions. For example, maybe you heard about the green coal power plant. Maybe you heard about some companies that identify the hydro, nuclear, even natural gas as a clean energies. And also maybe you heard about the CCSC, the carbon capture, or you heard about hydrogen. All those can be recognized as false solutions. I think most of the public, we cannot recognize which is a false solution, which is a true solution. It totally depends on the propaganda. Most of the big companies, they have more resources to do their advertisement. So I really want to use for the young generations, and because the young generation is easy to access the scientific information, to get the new technologies, the most recent information. The young generation can be the educator to educate the public what's the real solution for the climate and for the environment. So that's my second comment. The last one is, I think Professor Logan also mentioned about Chinese overseas investment, because in China, the environmental regulations is much stricter than 10 years ago, but we still found many Chinese companies went overseas to do investment in Southeast Asia, in Africa, about mining, about the mining program, like the Papala program, like the chemical factories. All those things need to be very carefully considered, because we don't want to see the same disaster happened in China 10 years ago to repeat in other developing countries. I think for the young generations, you can use your global network to connect with the young activities of those countries, to think up, to just like a watchdog, to monitor all those Chinese investment on pollution industry and mining industry, to track their environmental performance, and use local regulations as well as Chinese regulations to push those companies and investment to be more green, to be greener, and to be more responsible. Yeah, thank you.
I only can respond to the first question in a very short way. I think the suggestion will be 5 your friends. I think in China, if you want to work on this area, it's very important to build your own support system. And I think friend can offer you a lot of like help, and you can build this kind of system to work on this topic or work on this kind of issue together is very important. This is only from my personal experience. And thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you for the panelists for joining us and for giving us a portion of your time. We deeply enjoyed the conversation. Yeah.